This is the fourth and final quarterly freelance update video that I'll be making in 2021, or for 2021. But I'm slinging you a curveball today. I'm no longer freelancing full-time. I start a new full-time job tomorrow, or today if I'm late with this video. I tried to paint both a dreary and hopeful picture in the Q3 update. I simply wasn't bringing in enough money to keep the freelance experiment alive, even while living bare bones. Partly, I hadn't worked up my rates quickly enough as I gained more creative experience, and certainly in part, because I hadn't ramped up to 40 plus hours of billable work. That was partly by design. I didn't want that for the road trip. I didn't necessarily want that as I spent time on this channel. And I did better in the first half of the year than I expected. And so this freelance experiment dragged out longer than I expected as well. That was cool, but I was also caught in limbo. It was harder to look for freelance gigs and full-time roles at the same time than I had expected. I was hesitant to spend a ton of time searching for gigs in the event that a full-time offer came through, and vice versa. In the end, I got an exciting offer for each at the start of December. One for half-time in podcast and YouTube production, and this role that I'll be taking, a full-time data role. It was a really, really difficult choice. If I had taken the half-time gig, it would have been enough to keep this freelance experiment alive, but I ended up accepting the other offer, which is at the Shutterfly brand, Borrow Lenses. And I'm pretty excited to join their team there and help dig into some of their data. If you didn't know, I was an affiliate for Lensrentals, one of Borrow Lens' competitors. So in addition to this video serving as my quarterly update, this section in particular is something I want to talk about transparently. That way I can point people back to the timestamp as needed for explanation in the future. So a few things. I'm wrapping up my affiliate relationship with Lensrentals, as it would be a conflict of interest to profit off that while as an employee at Borrow Lenses. By the time this video is live, I'll have removed my affiliate links and requested cancellation of that account. So apologies if you were digging that discount in the past. Huge shout out to Lensrentals for great service and for supporting small creators. This doesn't change anything about the positive experiences that I've had with them in the past, including most recently with the Canon 85mm. But it's an obvious conflict of interest if I were to continue to promote them moving forward. In the future, free gear rentals are an employee perk, so I imagine as a photographer, I might make use of that from time to time. If I shoot with that gear here, I'll call that out, as I always would have done, so that you know I haven't necessarily purchased everything that I've reviewed. And this is for data roll, what my education traditionally prepared me for, and the space that I was part of for the 7 previous years to my freelancing. It's completely separate from my personal photography and this channel, but because of the unique position I found myself in, I think it was worth mentioning. I think it was relevant to the freelance experiment, and that's why I've decided to spend some time on it here. Q4 was my first fully monetized quarter, and it's not the best baseline because it's the holiday quarter. The lowest day was $1.29, the highest day was $5.79, and that averaged to be $2.66 per day. The total for Q4 was $244.97. It's rewarding to have this trickle coming in, and it's a big part of why I put that money back into the channel in order to help make those 85mm reviews, and to experience both of those lenses together for me, for my own benefit, in case I get one of them in the future. In my mind, for this past year on YouTube, I'm calling it mission accomplished on the proof of concept as to whether or not I could get a monetization trickle. Looking forward, it's just a question of trying new things for videos, continually trying to make videos helpful. I think that's how I've gotten here. I hope, you tell me, and continuing to improve them. Suggestions welcome. The total for the year was $379.14. These videos are a lot of work, but it is fun work. And I'm super thankful to be able to get my hands on some gear that I might not otherwise have the chance to try due to the viewership. So thank you very much for watching. The number of videos posted this year was poor compared to the goal, and the ones that I'm dropping right now at the start of 2022 don't technically count. We're wrapping up the year at 30. I think that goal was pretty aggressive, but overall I'm happy with that, given that I wasn't even doing YouTube half-time. For those who are interested in the summary statistics for the year, I've done about 8,000 watch hours for the year, twice the number that you would need to be considered for the monetization program. And the views I get are pretty consistent. I've averaged about 450 views a day across the year. If you are one of the 294 people that slapped the subscribe button in Q4, welcome friend. We ended the year at 1,538 subscribers. I haven't made 2022 goals yet for YouTube, and I'm still hesitant on firm subscriber count goals. But I think if we end up anywhere 5,000 and above, that would be really, really cool for the full year of 2022. If growth stays linear or starts to trail off, I'll still be here, but I probably won't spend as much of my free time on YouTube as I did in 2021. If it starts to break away from linear growth in a positive way, then I probably will end up prioritizing this as something that I spend my free time on. And in that case, I'll want to make sure my content is an extension of the trips and an extension of all the personal shooting that I love doing, so that my personal time and YouTube goals are very closely aligned, and it doesn't become something that feels like work or something that feels like a very big chore. If you've already watched the 85mm videos, then you know we need to talk about PolarPro. Huge shout out to them for being willing to work with small growing creators. This was the first time getting gifted gear from a camera company, and I'll always be super thankful that they were willing to do that for me at this early stage. They gifted me a PMVND Mist Edition 2, a separate mist filter, and a step-up ring. If you've been around, you know I use the Moment Cine Bloom filters from time to time, so we'll compare them in the near future. In the meantime, if you listen to creator podcasts, check out their podcast, Golden Hour with Dave Mays. I've been listening to that for years, and it's a great way to hear from other creators and YouTubers that he interviews. On the gig front, I've scaled down everything I've been working on, with the exception of a few hours per week. Throughout my entire career, I've always done something on the side. I think I've scaled down to the point where this is sustainable, but it's something that I want to periodically keep a close eye on so that I'm not overexerting myself and cutting too much into my personal time. If after the first quarter I don't feel like I have enough free time, I'll scale everything back again, maybe down to the occasional weekend photo shoot. And no more Runway. I will stress though, having a Runway fund really helps transition into freelancing. I think that building that fund should be your main priority. If you're thinking about doing something like this, have the means to contribute to it and want to lessen the financial stress that you'll have after you've made that transition. For Q4, I billed for about $5,300. Affiliates in the last quarter was about $60. And AdSense kicked in for $245. No big expenses, but I did have to dump $1,500 into my car recently. It's getting older. I just drove it around the whole country, so I knew it was coming. But this is the kind of stuff that's a bit miserable when you're freelancing and already running close to the edge of livable. So remember to account for things like that, and +1 for the Runway fund. Obviously, in place of freelance goals, my first big goal is to settle into the full-time role. Following that, I want to iteratively evaluate whether that's a good fit and make sure that I'm keeping enough free time. In terms of the content strategy here on YouTube for 2022, I need to take some time and think about that. I have a really long list of videos, so it's not exactly about what I want to make. It's more about how and in which order. But with the crazy end of the year, I just haven't gotten that far. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm still planning on keeping YouTube as a key focus as one of the ways I spend my free time, increasingly so as I get away from Instagram. If you follow me there, you'll notice I've cut down on the number of posts and how much time I take to bother with tags of the grid. It's still the best way to catch a sneak peek of the sample shots here in these review videos, but I'm maintaining that for my own enjoyment now and not necessarily for any kind of account growth or any kind of real business growth. And finally, some year-end lessons learned. Freelance takes a while. If I had taken that half-time gig, after a whole year, that would have been really the true first sign of long-term sustainability for me. Some people are going to move way faster to that point. Some people might move slower. This isn't my first crack at building a business, but it is for something that I intended to be full-time. And I came into this without much of a creative resume. If I had to do it again, I'm confident that I could move much faster to sustainability, but it's still difficult, so just plan for a long on-ramp. Number 2, look for adjacent interests. Podcast production was that for me. It's sort of adjacent to video work. I ended up doing much more of that than paid photography, and it's really remote friendly. In addition, I got to learn a lot about the challenges and processes that the hosts and the shows face, and all that learning adds up. In the future, that insight will be super valuable if I ever need to offer some sort of productized service for other podcast producers or hosts. And lesson 3, get on Twitter and try to do good work. I think all of my work came from Insta DMs, Twitter, or referrals, none of which came through LinkedIn. That's much different than tracking down jobs in a way that I'm used to in traditional IT. I wasn't on Twitter until late 2019, but if you aren't already on there and plan on looking for gigs, you'd be surprised at how many creators and podcasters find contract work by firing off a tweet. I follow the people that might be looking for help in the future. And obviously, if you do good work for people and have the bandwidth, the people on your team who enjoy working with you will happily recommend you to other connections that they have when the need arises. If you liked these updates, I really appreciate you following along. If you'll dearly miss them, follow me on Patreon, which you can do for free. And if a handful of people end up there after the release of this video, I'll make an attempt to do some quarterly updates for non-patrons that sum up this type of thing that I've been talking about in these last 4 videos.